Welcome back to the Redemptive Economics Podcast. My name is Mike Hatch, and man, am I grateful to be with you today. Whew, we got a show for you today, let me tell you. I can't wait to tell you. But before I do, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have already gone above and beyond to support our ministry. Man, am I grateful. Thank you. Those of you who stepped up. Of course, I've talked to many of you who are being prayerful about supporting this ministry, but also financially, many of you have stepped up in that way as well. And so big thank you to you for doing that. And there are, I'm as a thank you, these are called perks in kind of the creator world, but this is really a thank you to those of you who've decided to support financially. And so some of those thank yous or perks that you will receive are ad-free or premium content. We're going to provide regular personalized updates from me, special access to high-profile guests through online Q&A sessions. Eventually, we're working on all these things. You may advertise if you're a business, if you'd like to advertise on the show at $150 or more a month, you are eligible to do that. Of course, we'll provide you with free merchandise and free admission to future events as well. So big thank you. You guys are making this happen. I really appreciate it. This is listener supported completely, and we're not going to make any difference without you being there right along with us, helping to pave the way, literally pave the way. So this in the fiscal year 2024, which is September 2024 to September 2025, our goal is to raise $60,000, and that will go to cover, obviously, all the first year operational expenses and production costs. Man, I would be so grateful for your support. So, okay, on to today's show. We are talking with Rick Newton. Man, whew, I am so pumped about this interview. Of course, I just got done editing it, and so it's fresh in my mind as I'm doing this introduction. And Rick Newton is amazing. He's got over 30 years of management consulting experience. Rick possesses a relatively rare combination of strategic, entrepreneurial, leadership, coaching, technology, and training development and delivery skills that enables him to create practical, purpose-driven tools for purpose-driven leaders and organizations. As the founder of the award-winning Newton family of companies, Rick would provide vision, leadership, and passion to direct, manage, and grow each of those companies in service to great purpose. Now, he since, as he explains, is working his way out of those to focus on the Newton Institute, where he and a team of practitioners develop training tools and solutions that help leaders create flourishing teams that enable purpose-driven organizations to reach their full potential. The Newton Institute enables Rick to integrate his faith with over 30 years of consulting experience. At the Newton Institute, he practically applies what he and other thought leaders have learned to help individuals, leaders, and organizations identify their God-given design and fulfill their God-given purpose. Look, Rick has had a profound impact on the Pittsburgh region, and I am super excited. We talk about the idea of Start With Who, which is a book that he's writing, and it works in tandem with the Newton Institute because he's passionate about people discovering their unique gifts, talents, and abilities and identity in Christ, and then maximizing those for the glory of God. We also talk about some of the unique economic challenges that we as entrepreneurs are facing today and why that makes it so much more important to start with who. And then we also talk a little bit about Bitcoin and get into some macroeconomic discussion as well. Man, this is going to be an incredible episode. So without further ado, here is my interview with Rick Newton. Rick, thank you, man, for being with me here on the Redemptive Economics Podcast, brother. I'm so grateful to have you.
Yeah, it's always good to talk with you, Mike.
Absolutely. So a lot to talk about, honestly, today, or at least I have an ambitious agenda. We'll see how far we get, what we can cover during this time.
Well, I'll try to not be like Michael Saylor and you ask one question and I talk for an hour. So
Yeah, right.
even though with him, that's great. That's always a good
Oh, I
thing,
know.
right?
Most people love it when he does that.
Yeah.
No, but I'm excited to hear about your background because so the first things I'm going to ask you to share is just give us a background of your faith growing up. Did you grow up in a Christian home or not? When was it that you discovered that entrepreneurial bug in you, and then we'll talk about one of the key things that you're working on right now, which is the start with who message. I want to really spend a good amount of time talking about that. And then if we have time, man, let's I'd love to dive into some Bitcoin stuff, because I know you and I see things very similarly when it comes to that this is the Redemptive Economics podcast, which means you and I both look at Bitcoin as being having a ton of redemptive utility and value
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
it. And so hopefully we get a chance to talk about that as well. So why don't we start, Rick, if you wouldn't mind, just sharing a little bit about your faith background and what got you into entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So I grew up in a home that was fairly dysfunctional.
Hmm.
Uh, I was born in Wisconsin, came through North Carolina to Western Pennsylvania. My dad worked for
Hmm.
Coppers. He was a draftsman with them.
Oh,
My
wow.
mom was
Okay.
at a time a stay-at-home mom. Four boys. I'm the youngest of four boys.
Hmm.
They got divorced when I was in third grade, and that kind of turned my world upside down.
Hmm.
We moved to a different school district after that happened. My mom got remarried, and then we moved to the current school district where I live right now. And
Hmm.
I would say that background, that very dysfunctional background, created in me the need to try to be all things to all people. I wasn't really
Oh,
affirmed
yeah.
at home.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yep.
were Christmas and Easter Christians for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I was in high school, trying to be all things to all people, I was mostly trying to be the athlete. So I was a three-sport athlete in high school.
Oh,
I would
wow.
try to be the class brain in high school, the class
Wow.
clown. I'd go.
Literally all things to all people.
No, I'm not even done yet, right? So
Oh my gosh.
I'd go to campus life meetings on Monday, right? And then I
Yeah.
would I'd go out drinking on Tuesday night with my friends. So
Wow.
again, so I was trying to I didn't know who I was, right?
Yeah.
And so this is actually the genesis of this start with who message. I didn't know who I was, so I tried to be all things to all people. And at those campus life meetings, I remember, they'd always ask if you want to invite Jesus into your heart, mostly to avoid hell. And all I can tell you is,
Right.
I don't think anybody wants to go to hell. And
Right.
so I call that my fire insurance. So of course I would raise my hand and, say the prayer, but I
Yeah.
really, didn't live the Christian life even after I did that. Um, so anyway, the as the story goes, I started dating my now wife, who was my high school sweetheart, my senior year. And in the
Cool.
process of doing that, I found out that she was going to apply to a college called Grove City College, which is a college
Oh
north
yeah.
of Pittsburgh here.
Sure.
And it was a Christian college, so I knew that going in. I thought, okay, that's fine. But even before that, it was I think one of our last games of our basketball season, and a friend of mine asked, Rick, what are you going to major in college? And I
Hmm.
said, I have no idea. And this is like late January, early February of my senior year. And I hadn't
Okay.
applied to any college up to that point. And I'm the valedictorian of the high school class, and I still didn't know what I wanted to be or wanted to
Wow.
do, or hadn't really gotten on top of that. And again, that's didn't have a whole lot of support at home, but
Hmm.
or necessarily with the guidance counselor at school.
Hmm.
So I said, I don't know. And he said, well, you should become a chemical engineer.
Well,
Those chemical
interesting.
engineers, yeah,
That's random.
he said you'll always have a job and you'll make a lot of money. Well, so for a kid who grew up very poor, that sounded
Yeah.
good to me.
Hmm.
And it sounded flattering. Like he said, oh, you're very smart. So I said, okay. And so here, my high school sweetheart applying to Grove City College, I looked into it, and here they had a chemical engineering program.
Oh
Well, that was
wow.
good enough for me. So I applied to Grove City College, applied to Carnegie Mellon University, and was put on a waiting list at CMU, and was accepted at Grove City. It
Hmm.
was a whole lot cheaper than CMU, and
Hmm.
so
Yeah, I'll bet.
I accepted uh, the offer at Grove City, which was a miracle because I applied so late, but I
Hmm.
was able to get in, and that was the hand of Providence. So here I
Hmm.
go into chemical engineering, and my freshman year, I remember I had a religion and philosophy class, and so one of the texts we had to buy was a New American Standard Bible.
Hmm.
And again, so there was required reading, and I hadn't done a lot of Bible reading up to that point. And I came across this scripture that said, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul?" And
Hmm.
so up to that point, I was all about gaining the whole world. I wanted to
Yeah,
make a lot of
right.
money. I wanted to be something or someone. Um, and so that scripture really hit me hard. And as an engineer, I did the extrapolation, out on the curve to say, okay, well, what if I lived for 1,000 years and had everything I ever wanted, and everyone acknowledged me as king of the world and the greatest person that ever lived? So let's extrapolate. What if I gained the whole
Yeah.
world? But then I still lived, a life of eternity in hell.
Hmm.
And that was enough for me to say, you know what, I think I'm going to go move away from the fire insurance that I felt like I had in high school. And I made Jesus the Lord of my life. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. Let's do this thing. And so that totally changed my world again, upside
Rick,
down.
that's
Yeah.
I'm sorry for
Yeah.
I just think that is so crazy. How many people do that? How many people sit there and think, okay, let's extrapolate this out and see, okay, imagine in my mind if this were to play out and this and like go through all the different scenarios to lead that way. Like, I mean, I I think it's funny on one hand, but on the other hand, praise God that he gave you the
Yeah.
grace to do that and to come to that conclusion. I think it's hilarious coming from your
Yeah.
engineering mind.
I think that's part of my design. And I mean, I'm a person of extremes,
Yeah.
extreme sin, but also extreme grace.
Yes.
So maybe we get into some of that as well, but um, probably scaring the listeners now. But um, so that turned my world, I would say, upside right from that point on.
Hmm.
And something else started stirring in me. I started realizing probably late sophomore year, early junior year, that the people that I was studying with in all these different chemical engineering classes, I started noticing something really weird. And or two things. One, they actually liked what we were studying. I mean, and I didn't. I just thought it was
Hmm.
boring. I thought it was hard to understand. Now, again, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to get out of poverty, to try to
Yeah.
make a lot of money, is what I was told. And and so, but then I started realizing that I was spending more time next to the computer terminal more than I was next to the distillation column. And
Hmm.
so, probably that junior year, I started realizing, well, you know what? Life's too long or too short, however you want to think of it, to do something you don't like doing. And I
Hmm.
started talking it over with my girlfriend at that point, and we got engaged our junior year. And so this affected her as well. And I said, I think I want to get a computer science major on top of
Hmm.
my chemical engineering degree because I don't want anyone to think I was a quitter. I was doing fine in the
Wow.
program. I know it's crazy.
Well, yeah,
That
still
decision,
trying
by
to
the
be
yeah,
all things, right? In
yeah,
some sense
exactly.
there.
That's exactly right. I was still into hyper performance.
Yeah.
I just translated that into some Christendom things. Became a
Hmm.
really good Pharisee for a while, and but anyway, so I after so we made that decision, and so I started doubling up on classes. I mean, I was taking 21, 24 credits a semester just to be able to finish in 5 years. So in order to do that, I had to go an extra year, and to finish out the chemical engineering classes, and then I had to stay an extra year and double up during the junior and senior years for a whole bunch of computer programming classes and computer science
Hmm.
classes. Well, the beautiful thing about that was I really loved computer science, and
Hmm.
that's when I started realizing. Whereas with chemical engineering, I did that because I thought I'd make a lot of money. I
Yeah.
found that computer science or computer programming came very natural to me. It was something that I was really good at. And between my fourth and fifth years of college, I got an internship, total miracle story. Got an internship with IBM down in Atlanta where my father was living.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that even demonstrated even more how well um, designed I was to
Hmm.
work with data, work with computer science, to work with a keyboard. Um,
Hmm.
and you know, I could tell that this was something I was designed to do because I'd lose track of time. I'd go to the computer center at 9 o'clock. Next thing I know, they're tapping me on the shoulder. Hey, it's computer center's going to close in 15 minutes. It's, quarter till midnight.
Wow.
And so that was like a revelation to me. And from there, I joined Accenture, a consulting, one of the largest consulting companies in the world. Did a lot of IT consulting, developed computer systems. And then after that, I joined a company that agreed to pay for my MBA. So I'm going to answer the second part of your question. And one of the reasons I wanted to get an MBA was because over 5 years of undergrad, I only had one business class, which was a marketing class.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the other things were technical in nature. It was math, it was engineering, it was computer science, and obviously with liberal arts and some humanities mixed in there as well. And so I um, I hear I was programming computer systems that ran different business functions like accounting and warehouse management, order entry, pricing and promotions, all these different things, marketing databases. And I didn't have a stitch of, of business background. So I
Yeah.
said, let's get an MBA. I got it at the Katz Graduate School of Business at the University of Pittsburgh. And I remember the very first class, which was a financial accounting class. And I was so excited. I know a lot of people don't get excited about accounting, but when it
Yeah,
dawned
right.
on me that accounting, just like calculus is the language for engineering, accounting's the language for business. When that light bulb went off, I was like, oh, this
Interesting.
is fantastic. Like I need to understand this language. And
Hmm.
I went to the part-time program. So over the course of 3 years, um, I got this master's in business administration. And it was one of the hardest things I had to do because at that time we had a young child. I had to drive into Pittsburgh after I was working 40, 50 hours a week, 3 times a week at nights. And then the off nights, I still had to write papers and do homework. So it was a great sacrifice for myself and for my family. But at the end of that, or during that, I discovered um, who I really was and what I was born to be, vocationally anyway, which was I was born to be an entrepreneur
Hmm.
because I just absolutely love business. It helped give language to why I would walk into just about any business and break it down. What could they be doing better? What aren't
Hmm.
they doing well with pricing? What aren't they doing well with their products and services? Why don't they,
Hmm.
set the store up like this instead of like that? And so, um, again,
And
I yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, real quick before you go on, I want to make sure I want to write this down. You said accounting is the language of business.
Yes.
Like what was it? What did you compare it to?
Calculus. Calculus is the
Calculus.
language of engineering. Yeah.
Wow, that's I love that. That's really interesting. Okay.
Yes. I mean, and it really is. If you want to know the status of your business, I mean, that's why you set up accounting systems is to understand what's happening within your business. I always say leaders can't lead unless they see reality for what it is. And your
Hmm.
balance sheet, your chart of accounts,
Absolutely.
your cash flow statements, all of these things help you to see reality for what it is. Sometimes it's
Yep.
not pleasant, but at least you're
Yep.
seeing it for what it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
after that, from that point on, I just dreamed of being an entrepreneur. I dreamed of starting my own business.
Hmm.
I thought of at least 10 to 20 different businesses that I should start. And it wasn't until probably about 10 years later um, that from that. So I was around
Hmm.
30 when I graduated with my MBA. I left that company and I had a decision to make whether to start my own business or go back into consulting. I had a bit of a crisis of not really knowing exactly what I would want to do. The passion, the fire wasn't burning bright. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and this was probably 4 years after I graduated with that MBA. And so I made a decision to go back into consulting after that, and which was great. It really helped refine that desire for me, and actually confirm that what I really should do is just like Moses when he's called to deliver the children of Israel from the promised land, um, to evaluate what's in your hand, what's already in your hand. Sometimes
Hmm.
God doesn't drop something
Hmm.
from the sky for us to steward or to work with. He wants to do something that you already have,
Yep.
and He wants us to lay it down so that He can use it. And
Hmm.
so for me, it was to that point a 17-year, 18-year consulting career that was pretty successful. Did a lot of good things, both on the technology side and in the eventually ended up doing business strategy for a lot of different companies, and absolutely loved doing that. And so that's what I didn't really want to start a consulting company, but I knew that's what was in my hand. So I was going to leverage
Hmm.
that. So in 2003, 10 years later, on the on March 3rd, 2003, 03, I incorporated Newton Consulting LLC. And so that's really what started my entrepreneurial journey. And I was 39, just about to turn 40 at that point.
Joe Hadoba and Hadoba Consulting is who I use for my promotional and marketing needs. Joe is a seasoned professional with 2 decades of experience in the dynamic realms of sales and marketing. Throughout Joe's journey, he's witnessed the ebb and flow of businesses, understanding intimately what it takes to navigate the fine line between success and failure. His diverse background spans industries from logistics to banking and advertising, giving him a comprehensive view of the entrepreneurial struggle. And I can say that from experience, he understands us. Those of us who are entrepreneurs. In every role, his focus has remained unwavering, driving business development, spearheading impactful marketing strategies, and fostering sustainable growth. Plus, when you work with Joe, you will learn a ton through the process. I speak from experience. So reach out to Joe today. His contact information is in the show notes, and you will be so glad you did. Okay. And you went on beyond Newton Consulting. You had, up to recently, you had a few companies, right?
Yeah. So um, lots of stories in here, Mike. But I would say Newton Consulting. I was involved with Newton Consulting for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we are now in 2024, and um, that company didn't really get started until around 2004, even though I incorporated in terms of really starting to gain traction and get clients.
Mm-hmm.
So that company, Newton Consulting, eventually grew to 200 employees, $40 million in revenue. We had offices at one point in Chicago and London. We were trying to expand internationally. It was it was very successful by the grace of God, and by applying these start with who principles, which I'm sure we'll get into. But
Yep.
the but out of that um, was still a restlessness in me, and so I did have an entrepreneurial bug, and so I started another company we called Newton Enterprise, which was more focused on ERP software specifically, so that we could separate that from Newton Consulting, which was more on the application development side of things, and project management, program management. And that didn't work after about 2 years. So we closed that up. We shuttered that. I actually started a benefits consulting practice, bought a piece of business from the Pittsburgh Tech Council, brought that under my umbrella, thinking it would be a good lead generation for the technology side of things. It didn't quite work out. It was profitable, but in the end, it was a bit of a distraction. So after about 5 years, we let that go, sold it to somebody who that was their primary and sole focus. And so that worked out. That worked out well, but it was just me searching for, it was the entrepreneurial bug as well as me searching for answers on how to diversify my business, how to solve the business development challenges. And then my recruiter, she was a really good recruiter, and she um, had some extra time on her hands because we were growing, but she couldn't. She could meet that demand with probably part time with half of her time. So she was like, "What should I do at the other half?" And I said, "Well, what would you like to do?" And she said, "Well, I'd like to sell myself to some other clients." And so she started doing. And then what happened shortly thereafter? That became the second largest practice area for us. So we
Oh,
grew this
wow.
recruiting business.
She was
Yeah,
kind of an intrapreneur
yeah,
in a
yeah.
sense that started something new within. So that's rare. That's very rare that works out well. I
It,
would
it did
say,
work, it did work out well. She was entrepreneurial, and that was part of our DNA as a
yeah,
company. Was we were entrepreneurial, and so that attracted entrepreneurs,
I
people
see.
who were willing to take risks, and so she was willing to do that, and she was very good at what she did,
Hmm.
and she grew the business. Um,
Hmm.
Probably a few years later after that, so now we're probably in 2015. I had tried to. One of the reasons I believe for our success was we embodied and we practiced servant leadership. And so I partnered with a thought leader in that space to bring some of that training inside of my company, and we called that internal training capability the Newton Institute.
Okay.
And so after we started working with him for a little bit, we started having conversations about, hey, are we stronger together than we are apart? And to make a long story short, I ended up buying his business, brought him into Newton Consulting, and then we rebranded his um, uh, IP, and we launched the Newton Institute. So basically we had what I would call the Newton family of companies, Newton Consulting,
Right.
that focused, on bridging the strategy execution gap across so many different practice areas. So that had grown quite a bit by that point. We had Newton Talent, which was focused on recruiting. It was recruit process outsourcing. It wasn't headhunting. It was us taking on the entire recruiting function for an organization. So we did it
Okay.
all. They would basically
Right.
outsource that to us. And then there was the Newton Institute, which was this leadership development arm that not only would benefit my internal companies, but we would take to market what this thought leader had. He was a best-selling author, PhD, great,
Mm-hmm.
you know, great, a lot of wisdom, a lot of thought leadership in that space.
Yeah.
And so we went to market. So we called that the Newton family of companies. So that was Newton
Mm-hmm.
Institute. And yeah, so that's to answer your question. Those were the companies that I spent the most time with. And then as Newton Institute was not gaining traction,
Mm.
then I slowly started spending more time over there versus over in the Newton consulting space.
Mm-hmm.
This thought leader, we made him president. After a year, we made another senior leader that we brought in, president of Newton Institute. None of those things worked. And then I realized, you know what? I probably need to take that on. It is my passion. I believe it's what
Mm-hmm.
God put me here on this earth. And so I started taking on the leadership role of that. And we invested. So two things are happening now. I'm stepping away from Newton Consulting. Some would
Mm-hmm.
say I took my eye off the ball.
Mm.
And so I promoted a key leader who was actually over in the UK to be the president of Newton Consulting. And then I started focusing on Newton Institute and
Mm-hmm.
pouring literally millions of dollars into this to create a platform
Mm.
to propagate this whole um, thought leadership and some tools around how do you make servant leadership practical within
Mm.
your organization. And so we built that platform, we rolled it out, and the marketplace yawned, and
Oh
it was
wow.
not successful. Um,
Ugh.
and at the same time, I'm draining resources away from Newton Consulting, and so it started going downhill. We lost some key clients. I found out that the leader that I had promoted did not have my same heart, did not have the same DNA associated
Mm.
with what I had tried to embed into our culture, which was customer focused, values driven, employee
Mm-hmm.
centric culture.
Mm-hmm.
He gave that lip service, but he didn't operate that way. And so I started hearing a lot of people saying, "Hey, this person is undermining why we came here,
Mm.
and if you don't do something, you're going to lose a lot of good people." And we were
Mm.
starting to lose some good people.
Mm.
So I eventually had to let him go, and I replaced him with another key leader in the organization so I had a pretty good run up to that point, and then we literally were cut in half. Our business was cut in half on the consulting side.
Oh
We went
wow.
from like
Mm.
27 million down to 14 million
Wow.
dollars in revenue, like 150
Mm.
employees down to 80 employees. So that was a very, very painful
Mm.
time in my life. At the same
Mm.
time, I'm trying to sprinkle the entrepreneurial dust, you know, on this leadership development company, and it's
Yeah.
not working.
Yeah.
And and so
Mm.
again, two things happened. Number one, my the leader that I did promote was fantastic.
Mm.
He's still the CEO at that company, and he's a blessing,
Mm.
and he's been a blessing to the company, a blessing to our
Wow.
clients, a blessing to our employees, a blessing to me and my family. And
Praise God.
yeah,
Mm.
so thank God for him. Um, and he took it to all new heights,
Mm.
way beyond where I could take it.
That's
Um,
amazing.
and then on the Newton Institute side, Well, even before that, I started having some symptoms around. I had started having some chest
That's right.
pains and some what I found out later was angina pains. And again, to
Mm.
make a long story short, I ended up getting an echocardiogram. And before I could, they take a picture of your heart and how it's beating and how it's working. And then you get on the treadmill and then they do a before and after take to see how well your heart's responding. I didn't even get on the treadmill.
Hmm.
They called in a cardiologist and they basically said, Mr. Newton, a quarter of your heart is not beating.
Oh, wow.
And that was on a Friday. My father-in-law had just passed away. They tried to keep me there because they wanted to do a heart cath, and I said no. I'm going to go. I have a viewing this evening. I have to get to, and I have a funeral
Wow.
tomorrow. I'm going to bury my father-in-law on Saturday, and I said let's schedule this for Monday. They were not going to let me leave, and I just said sorry guys, that's not an option. And I literally walked out under great protest from that staff,
Wow.
and so
Yeah.
I fulfilled those responsibilities. Found out that I was going to have a heart cath on a Monday, on that same Monday, following Monday. So I fasted on Sunday, went in early
Mm.
morning. By the time I woke up from the heart cath, we're looking at, I guess, 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And they, again, Mr. Newton, you've got at least 3 arteries that are 98, 99% blocked. And
Hmm.
we want to do open heart surgery. We want to do
Oh my
triple
gosh.
bypass. Ended up being quadruple bypass. And we want to do
Wow.
it tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
So I went from,
Wow.
Friday echocardiogram, Saturday burying my father-in-law, Sunday fasting, wondering what's going to happen on Monday. And all I remember thinking was I just had this
Gosh.
sense I kind of knew this was going to happen. I just knew this was going to happen. And
Interesting.
and so I went into um, that Monday was just once we decided to do the open heart surgery on Tuesday. I mean, there was so much flurry
Mm.
of activity. There's all this testing and they're poking and probing me, of course. But I also had to get my affairs in order relatively
Mm.
quick. I had these 3 businesses, some of them not doing very well. I had to get my
Mm.
family put, like, hey, this is what's happening. Get the prayer
And
chain going.
about what year is this?
This is 2018 now.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're coming up on my 6th year anniversary of that.
Okay.
And at that point, I was under so much pain,
Mm.
pain, not just financially and work wise, but some relationships.
Mm.
And I remember praying to the Lord. I said, Lord, I'm fine either way here. If you,
Mm.
I would love to be with you, Jesus. That's a very attractive option right now.
Yeah.
And I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm not embellishing that at all. I was very clear that I was good with that.
Mm.
But if you want to, if I wake up in the hospital, I'll know you have more work for me to do.
Mm.
And so, the rest of the story because Tuesday morning, after 6 hours of surgery, I ended up being a quadruple bypass. I remember
Gosh.
barely hearing my son and my wife talking. I could tell they were to my left. And I
Mm.
remember thinking, oh, I'm alive. I literally was like, I'm alive. And, um,
Wow.
and I thought, okay, I guess there's more work for me to do. And I just said, Lord, let's do this.
Wow.
And so so ever since then, I don't know how many more years I have left. I've been pretty focused on saying, Lord, what is it that you want me to do? Who is it that you want me to be? And
Mm.
let's focus on that and let's remove the distractions. And probably one of the very first things
Mm.
as I came out of that and recovered and, got back to work probably a month or two later at the latest, I, I started realizing that God was never going to bless the partnership that I endeavored to have with this other thought leader. Not because this thought leader was anything negative at all. He's a beautiful man, wonderful material. I still believe in everything that he does. I cheer him on. We're
Mm-hmm.
really good friends still. And, but I realized that I had head trash. I was hiding behind his
Mm.
credentials and his thought leadership when God had put something inside of me to bring to the
Mm.
marketplace and to bring to the world. And so that started a year-long dialogue and conversation about him buying the IP
Mm-hmm.
back from me. and me getting
Okay.
focused on solely the Newton Institute. That was, again, where my
Yep.
passion was. And all I can tell you is once I started saying yes to the assignment that God gave me, which again, we can talk about this start with who message,
Yeah.
um, everything turned around financially as well. And again, in
Interesting.
hindsight, I can tell that God was not blessing this partnership because I was hiding behind this other. I was disqualifying myself
Hmm.
because I didn't have the PhD. Of all the education, all this education I had, I still didn't think I had enough. Right? I didn't have a PhD. I didn't have a
Yeah.
best-selling book, and so um, I thought. Um, this isn't about me. I tried. It was false humility. I was like, I'll promote what you have. But I started realizing that God did
Huh.
put something in me that did need to come to the marketplace. And once I said yes to that, everything started turning around. Things started
Wow.
flourishing again, and the the river started flowing, the brook started flowing, the favor started flowing. I remember for about 2 or 3 years, the favor of God left me, and when it came
Hmm.
back, I just remember crying like, "Oh Lord, thank you so much," because it felt
Wow.
so good to be back. I would rather have God's favor than anything else in my life. And and
Absolutely.
and again, that's a big reason why the company was so successful. Was we dedicated that
Hmm.
business as a kingdom business. It was
Mm-hmm.
all for the glory of God. Um, whether we served clients well, whether we treated employees well, whether we gave back to the community, whatever that was a kingdom business. That's why I
Hmm.
was president, not CEO, because Jesus was the CEO of that
Hmm.
organization.
Hmm.
And it was God's favor that allowed us to
Yeah.
grow and to scale and to have more influence so that we could be a greater blessing. And like I said, when I kind of got off track during those, I'd say 3 years that I started the Newton Institute, I'll
Mm-hmm.
call that Newton Institute 2.0. 1.0 was when it was
Hmm.
an internal leadership development capability. 2.0 was when it was we went to market with my friend's intellectual property. And
Yeah.
again, nothing wrong with anything that he's doing. He's still doing that, and he's very successful.
Mm-hmm.
But he just got on the wrong ship. He was like Jonah getting on the wrong ship, headed in the
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm more like Jonah. I was the one running away. But anyway, so I needed to be cast away, and so now he's doing fine. And once I said yes to the assignment God had on
Wow.
me, things really started turning around. And that favor came back, and so
And was
that's
that
yeah.
was that about the time? Because you and I spent some time together in a Truth at Work roundtable, and I feel like that was a little bit after that when you decided to focus more on the Newton Institute. Was when you joined the Truth at Work roundtable. Was that about that time?
Yeah, it was. That
Okay.
was well. That was probably around 2000. So
Hmm.
I was still working on Newton Institute stuff, but I hadn't extricated myself full time from the consulting or the recruiting businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do remember because I think we started that in the year 2000 because it was during the whole COVID pandemic stuff.
Wait,
And
you keep saying 2000. You mean
2020.
2020?
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Right.
Thank you.
Uh
Thank you.
huh. Yeah.
Anyway, that was 2020.
Okay.
And yes, at that point, um, there was a lot going on still at that point, and
Yeah.
I know I needed some other people to walk alongside of me.
Yeah.
I had some more head trash about me, doing things on my own and by myself. I needed to surround myself with other godly men to be able to speak into my life, and so that's why I joined Truth at Work and got
Hmm.
great wisdom and great um, advice, counsel through
Mm-hmm.
that period because you have all these tiny little micro decisions that you're making, but they add up to something very big.
Yeah.
Which to bring this all to a wrap,
Mm-hmm.
in 2021 we started planning for me to sell half of my business to my management team. That would give
Mm-hmm.
me resources to continue the Newton Institute work, and that would enable them to take ownership and really take the company farther than where they were right now. And that's actually when I first started uncovering Bitcoin because I knew I was going to have a liquidity event and I wanted to steward
Mm-hmm.
those resources that God was going to put into our hands.
Mm-hmm.
But so I sold half of that company in 2021 to my management team.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 years later, and ultimately it was through 2023, all the negotiations were happening, but it culminated at the beginning of 2024 when I sold the consulting business. And
Okay.
then we sold the recruiting business in April. And so those businesses are now, other than some earnouts and the like, those things are, I'm not in those businesses at all. And I am
Okay.
totally free to focus on the Newton Institute.
TBD Bookkeeping is who I use for my bookkeeping needs, and I'm thrilled to recommend them to you. As business owners with 3 kids themselves, Ryan and Danielle Hatch understand the value of time and the importance of work-life balance. TBD Bookkeeping can take over the day-to-day bookkeeping of your business so you can focus more on growth, operations, and customer relationships. I can speak from experience. If you're a business owner, you need a bookkeeper, and TBD Bookkeeping is simply the best in the business. Find their contact information in the show notes, and when you mention Redemptive Economics, you'll receive 10% off your first 3 months. Call TBD Bookkeeping today and learn more about the benefits I've experienced: more time, peace of mind, and the ability to plan for the future. Wow. Okay, so man, when we talk about start with who, man, that is absolutely such a reflection of your journey and what God has taken you through so clearly, as you just shared. To get out of your own way and realize that, no, God, you're calling me to do this. And then to feel the favor of God return as you kind of got back on mission for him.
Yeah.
Holy cow, that's incredible. Okay, so I mean, that's a great transition. Let's talk about start with who, which is, I think you said you didn't necessarily mean to make it a play off of Simon Sinek's Start with Why.
Yeah.
It just was the best way to describe it.
That's
basically.
Right. That's right.
So, I mean, having that background is going to give so much more depth of understanding about what you're about to tell us then. So I'm really looking forward. So share what your kind of the overall idea of start with who.
Yeah. So I would say Newton Institute's differentiation is all around what we call DNA driven leadership, which
Okay.
has this through line called start with who.
Mm-hmm.
And so we believe that every individual and organization is designed with distinctive characteristics to serve the world in a unique way.
Hmm.
And so what we do is we help uncover, we help individuals, leaders, teams, and organizations uncover, embrace, and stay true to that design. And so that's why we say start with who. So if you can imagine
Yeah.
a compass, we have
Mm-hmm.
a tool that we call the guiding compass, and it's at the organizational level and it's at the leadership or individual level. But let's
Mm-hmm.
start with the individual level because everyone will be able to identify with this. We believe, according to Ephesians 2:10, that starting with who is the key to unlock your why. And
Hmm.
so Ephesians 2:10 says, "We are his workmanship created for good works in Christ."
Mm-hmm.
Workmanship, other translations say masterpiece design. The
Mm-hmm.
Greek word there is poeme. And it's the story that God wants us to embody. And it's really, we are his workmanship, and we are created in the image of God in
Mm-hmm.
some way that no one else ever has been and no one else ever will be. And so therefore we have an opportunity to image God, to express some nature of God in some unique way that no one else ever has or ever will. And
Mm-hmm.
then out of that, so we think the key to understanding what are the good works Christ has called you to do. And by the way, we think this is true whether you're a Christian or not. You're called to do something. You're designed for a purpose. You have a purpose here on earth. But the way to find out what that purpose is, to answer the why am I here question, we think you need to answer the who am I question. And so that's why we start with who. So we think we no, we don't think we know that
Mm-hmm.
the who question is your true north. So that on the compass, we say start true north. And as a matter of fact, when people get off track in their lives, it's because they forget who they are. Think
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
think
Yeah.
about what I did back in high school. Think about what I was trying to discover through college and through my vocation and work. I was trying to answer that question, who am I? And so if we can help people answer that question, we have a whole platform, we have all these tools that we use to answer that question, to give language to how you're uniquely designed in the image of Christ. Then that creates a vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
that then informs the why am I here question. right? We are his
Yeah.
workmanship created for good work. So we can give language to the why question. We can give language to the how question. How should I be living? Which is all about values. We believe every person has unique values that flow out of their unique design.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's transcendent values that apply to everybody, but there's if you're an engineer, you probably are more about attention to detail and quality and efficiency and those types of things. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur, you're probably more about risk taking and big picture thinking and problem solving. So
Mm-hmm.
those are things that you value more than maybe an engineer would value.
Mm-hmm.
And so we give language to values. So we answer the who am I, why am I here, how should I be living, and then on the western side of the compass is the where question. Where am I going? So we're talking about mission, vision, and values here, but we believe that mission, vision, and values should be informed by answering first the who. It's a key that unlocks the answers to all of those other questions. And I think people struggle so much answering those other questions, which we all ask, by the way. Why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
What should I be doing? Where am I headed? Where's my life going? Um, we struggle answering those questions because we don't first answer the who question. And so we do that. We do that for executive leaders. We actually are creating a platform that we're going to be putting into the hands of coaches, consultants, and companies that want to add this, what we think is a missing piece, to the existing leadership, team building, organizational culture tools that they already have. We're not looking to replace anything that anyone has. And we're just saying we think that not enough attention has been spent or paid attention to answering this who question. And we believe that once you do, it's not only complementary to all the things that you're probably already doing, whether it's Maxwell or Lencioni or EOS, those types of things. It's a force multiplier. It actually elevates the value of those other frameworks and tools, because everything flows out of the who question first. So, as an example, I don't know if you're
Yeah.
familiar with the Lencioni team building framework, but it starts with trust. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty hard for me to trust you if I don't know you. So again,
Yeah.
we come even before that trust is developed, and we start giving language to who you are, letting
Mm-hmm.
people get to know you and your design, and vice versa. And again, the light bulb goes off. Oh, you're not wrong. You're just different. Like, so how many times we have
Yeah.
teams?
Oh, absolutely.
How many
Yes.
times we have team conflict, and it's
Yep.
because we're trying to force people to be like we are, or we just
Yep.
don't see things the same way. And what we're saying is, no, those are good things. It's good that we're
Yep.
different. So let's give
Absolutely.
language to those differences where we can invite people, we can understand, respect, and receive people for who they are, not how we want or need them to be. And so then we can invite them into the areas where we may have weakness, and vice versa. And so that's part of the team uh, work that we do. And I say all that to say, so we say start with who first. Let's give language to your design that will
Mm-hmm.
then elevate even the trust relationships that Lencioni says is the foundation
Mm-hmm.
for a high performing team. And so we that those are the kinds of things that we do. That's just one example of when you start with who, it elevates the value proposition of these other leadership team and organizational models that are out there.
I love that because when you think about um, who I keep coming back because I've heard over and over again the Simon Sinek thing with start with
Mhm.
why kind of thing. And so the thought that came to my mind as you're sharing is really it's interesting because especially in God's kingdom is his in his economy, the who is the why. So who you are is why you would do what you do, right?
Yeah, no, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. And so listen to this. So I love Simon Sinek. I've watched his Start With Why video, both myself and in leadership development, contexts, at least 10, 15 times. Get something out of it every time. It's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I spoke at a conference in Ohio a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, the way you were talking, you must have read Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game." And I said, No, I have not read that book. And as a matter of fact, I've never heard of it. And much to my shame, I guess. So he said, well, when you're talking about purpose and why, he talks about just cause, and he started explaining it a little bit. So I went out there and I said, well, I'm curious about what this is. And so I listened to three different lectures from Simon. One was in Belgium, one was here in the States. I forget where the other one was. And invariably, either someone from the audience asks this question or he started asking it himself and answering it before someone would even ask the
Hmm.
question.
Okay.
And they would say, hey, listen, you talk a lot about start with why, and now you're telling us that the just cause is something that we should be paying attention to. And that's even more foundational than your why. And they will invariably ask, what's the difference between your just cause, which is how you're going to make the world a better place, which
Mm-hmm.
is what we would say your why is, um, and what you say is your why. And the way he explained it, he says this exactly, and I'm quoting him. He says, your why is who you are.
Hmm.
You're,
Wow.
and I just went, done. We He's
Yeah.
saying start with why, and he just said why was who you are, but he has all of this intellectual property and a whole business based
Right.
on this brand called Start With Why. He can't just change that to Start With Who. But he goes on to explain that the why is really your vision. It's your picture of the future. It's why you
Mm-hmm.
started the world. So he goes,
Mm-hmm.
it's the reality you want to see come to pass. Um, but he's before he says that, he says it's who you are. It's unchangeable,
Hmm.
and it's the essence of who you are and why you started the company and what you wanted to see. So he
Hmm.
said that's more in the past, whereas your just cause is. I'm sorry, I said it backwards. Your your why is looking into the past, why you started something and who you are, whereas he says your just cause is a
Mm-hmm.
picture or a vision of what the future looks like. And so just different terminology. We would probably agree 100% on you got to answer all of these questions. I don't care what you
Mm-hmm.
label that, whether you call something mission and someone else calls it vision, or someone else calls it why and we call it who. The real
Yeah.
question that we focus on is answer the who am I question.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I here? Which we think if you answer that and build that vocabulary around that, it informs, it helps you to answer the why am I here? How should I be living? And where
Hmm.
am I going? And what should I be doing in the context of
Yeah.
where I'm going? Questions.
Man, and you can take that so deeply as a Christian, because as a Christian we know that if we're going to start with who as Christians, we start with Jesus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Jesus is the who. He's the way, the truth, and the life, and we find our true identity, ultimately in him, and then through that discover the unique ways you described that he ways that he designed us to contribute and produce value, right? Which then gets a
Yes.
little bit more specific on the who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we layer that. So what we don't do is what we hope and pray church leaders and, you know, equippers, what they do is they should lay the foundation
Hmm.
of who you are in Christ. So
Yeah.
that is
Yep.
I call that the foundational identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we are seated in heavenly places with Christ Jesus. We're a child of God. We're a prince of the King. All of these wonderful truths are things that
Mm-hmm.
we really need to have. So I'm not laying that foundation. I'm letting others lay
Mm-hmm.
that foundation. But once that foundation is laid, and
Mm-hmm.
I would even say for non-Christians, you may not have that foundation. We can still give language on top of that foundation to answer how are you, what's your unique design? What's your unique identity that goes above those truths that are common for all Christians? Again,
Yep.
it's the unique way that you're designed in the image of Christ, and we can give language to that. So you're exactly right. Both are important. I would say the foundational design and identity of who we are in Christ is the most important, of course.
Yeah.
But beyond that, then we want to
Mm.
honor how you've been made in the image of Christ on top of that. And here's the reason why we need to do this. This isn't all about self-help or positive thinking or navel gazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is about there's glory locked up inside of each person. And the
Amen.
glory that
Yeah.
you will give to God is when you are operating 100% out of who he made you to be. So let's give language to what that
Yeah.
looks like. Now, why do we need you to show up fully imaging God the way you've been designed? Why do we
Mm.
need that? Well, number one, if you're designed in the image of God in a way that never ever has and never ever will be, right? We need you to
Mm-hmm.
show up because I get to know God more by understanding who you are. You're going to
Absolutely.
express and you're going to have some
Yeah.
unique dimension of God that it's
Yep.
people who have empathy blow me away because I have it's like my number 34 on my strengths, Clifton strengths, Um,
Yeah.
but when I see
Well, you're an
someone with,
engineer. You're an
yeah,
engineer.
I
That's your.
guess, but when I see someone exercise empathy, which happens to be my wife's number one, I'm blown
Mm,
away. I'm like, how do you
mm,
do that? Right? That's such a
yeah.
foreign thing for me, but I love it because God is, he's both like my number one is strategic, but he's both strategic and empathetic. And um,
Mm,
so I love being able to see how, that unique aspect that they're demonstrating, but it also points me to, oh, that's how God is as well.
mm,
So that's one reason that we need you to show up in your unique
yeah.
design. The second reason, which is a much broader topic, but I believe that Christ died to save every person, but he also died to redeem the world, and he
Mm-hmm.
came to renew all things.
Yep.
And so I believe in the renewal of all things, which means he came to redeem every facet of society, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
government, education, entertainment industry, media, all of these areas that we complain about, by the way, as Christians. I believe
Mm-hmm.
it's because Christians have withdrawn the salt and light from those areas. When
Mm-hmm.
God is saying, I'm asking you to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I'm asking you
Mm-hmm.
to bring heaven to earth. And so, how do we do that? Well, we understand who we are, why I was born, and now we start understanding
Mm,
some of us are called to go into Hollywood. Some of us are called to go into the marketplace, into business, or into
mm-hmm.
education, or into government. And the more
Mm,
people understand their design and why they were designed and
mm-hmm.
what that calling is on their life, which comes out of who they are. So it's just very natural to just
Yeah.
be who God called you to be. The more we will be able to bring his redemptive purposes across every facet of society. So we need you
Amen.
we
Yep.
need you to do this work for two reasons. One, we get to know God more, and two, we get to see you where God plants you bring heaven to
Mm.
earth in a way that the world desperately needs it. And so
Ah,
it's a
yeah.
really important work that we're doing.
Absolutely. You're redeeming people. I mean, obviously God is redeeming. I'm thinking about, redemptive economics. That was a
Yeah.
very intentionally chosen title for me for this podcast because God is working in and through us to reconcile the world to himself, for him to redeem. And so we're called to participate in that redemptive purpose. And one of the ways that you are doing that in what you're doing with the Newton Institute is literally allowing people to redeem who they truly are,
Yes.
who
Yeah.
God created them
Yeah.
to be. And just like yourself, as you described, who got lost trying to be all things to all people and maybe garner approval, whatever you want to call it, you lose that. You in a sense, we sell ourselves into enslavement, by doing
Well,
that.
no, that's absolutely right. So here's the thing. Here's why economics is so important in the context of everything we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Jeff Doherty with Allstate Insurance has the distinction of being the very first sponsor of the Redemptive Economics podcast, and I couldn't be happier to promote his services. I've known Jeff for many years now, both as his pastor and friend, and man, I can say with confidence that he is a man of strong faith who aligns well with the Redemptive Economics values. So reach out to Jeff. He can offer you options for a wide variety of coverage and services. He's committed to helping Pittsburgh residents assess their immediate and long-term needs and choose options that will help you achieve your goals. When you want to explore options for protecting your home, personal property, or financial future, Jeff Doherty is your guy. You'll find Jeff's contact information in the show notes. Hey, go grab a cup of coffee with him, get to know him, even if it's just to review your current coverage in case you need to make adjustments. And I promise you're going to love Jeff every bit as much as I do.
Why do people not give attention to answering the who am I question? I think it's because they're so busy surviving, they don't give themselves an opportunity to thrive.
Yep. Yep.
And what's at the core of keeping them busy? I think it's our broken monetary system. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that our fiat currency, our monetary system is so broken, it's keeping us from embracing the abundant life that God has for us.
Yep.
And that's why the economics is so important to me. One,
Mm-hmm.
I believe our system, a lot of people think money is neutral. Oh, it's how you use it that either is redemptive or evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that. I actually, the more I have studied our current economic system, the more I
Mm-hmm.
realize that it's actually evil.
Mm-hmm.
Our economic system is evil, and that means it's a force multiplier for evil. Now, think. I'm going to zoom up here for just a second.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's my thesis. I'm doing this work of uncovering unique image bearers and hopefully enabling them and empowering them to be who God called them to be and to do what He's called them to do. But in the background, you've got this evil system that Satan is in charge of, I believe,
Yep.
and um, and that evil system is a force multiplier of evil in every one of those spheres that I just talked about. We see it
Mm-hmm.
in government; it attracts these evil, corrupt people closer to the money printer.
Yep.
In media, where people lie and they're just doing things, they tell you things for clicks, not for truth's sake.
Yeah.
um, like all down the line, the medical industry, all these different facets of society are corrupted because of the love of money and because our system is corrupted. And you think about it, our system encourages debt. The Bible says you should be saving. It encourage it not encourages it shows partiality, right? It get the rich, those with
Absolutely.
assets get richer
Yep.
on the backs of the poor who get poorer, who don't have
Yep.
assets, living to paycheck, and so they can't keep up with inflation. And it's because the value of money changes every single day. It's differing weights and measures, which God says, um,
Mm.
He detests, right? He
Yeah.
detests differing weights and measures. And so that system is evil, but then it causes a forced multiplication of evil where back in, when we went off the gold standard in 1971, you can see that at that point, all of a sudden society started going to hell in a handbasket, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the downfall, more divorce rates went up. Why is that? It's because people couldn't keep up, and so the other spouse started going to work, and then not only did they
Mm-hmm.
start going to work, they had to start working two jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's so much harder to make ends meet now, and that financial strain is causing divorce. It's causing
Mm-hmm.
other people to raise your kids other than the parents raising their kids. And so I could keep going on and on. It's enabled wars to happen that shouldn't even
Yeah.
be happening because it's a
Mm-hmm.
hidden, um, the, we're not voting on whether that money should be used
Mm-hmm.
to go to war in Iraq or Afghanistan or Ukraine or whatever the case may be. So
Mm-hmm.
all of these problems with the monetary system force multiply the evil. And so, even if you and I show up in the media uh, sphere,
Mm-hmm.
or the marketplace sphere, and we bring redemptive purposes, Satan's just going to wait us out, and he says, "That's fine. I will drain their energy. I will drain. They make some grounds temporarily, but don't worry. I have an ace in the hole. I'll be able to
Mm-hmm.
continue to increase or debase their currency. I'll be able to water down the economic energy that even God
Mm-hmm.
gives them. I'll
Yeah.
water that down so it will not have as much impact generation to generation. Estate taxes, all these things just keep stealing money from the hands of his people. And so I look at
Yeah.
that and I say, if we don't deal with the economic system, if we don't
Mm-hmm.
fix that, even though we're doing all
Yep.
these good things across these other spheres of society in every country in the world,
Yep.
the enemy still has the ace in the hole to take back the ground that we take from him.
Absolutely. Yeah, there oh, that's so well said, Rick. That's so well said. That's exactly right. There's a corrupt kind of base layer that we're all in a sense have been forced to build on, and there was no other option until Bitcoin, of course. Um and so yeah, unfortunately, I love how you called it a force multiplier for evil. so a lot of Christians don't understand this. They don't understand that the Bible describes what you just our monetary system, which is inflationary, which basically means that the government, in partnership with big banks, central banks, get to print dollars at will, arbitrarily, and in doing so, obviously that expands the currency supply, and it makes all the dollars everybody's holding worth less. So some people have called it a hidden tax. At least it's straight up theft. Okay, and the Bible uses language like violence and murder when it comes to describing
Hmm.
a system, a
Hmm.
monetary system like this. And I just don't think we see it as much in Scripture. It's because I don't think it's being preached. Um, and so, yeah, you can't separate the two. They go hand in hand, like you said. It's very intertwined. Um, the economic system and the loss of our identity and understanding, who we are, true value, because value is being drained away from all of us.
Yeah, so
And
think about
yeah,
the impact that fiat currency has. So
mm-hmm,
first of all, it steals our time. We have
yep,
to work extra hard. We have to work extra hard to either make more money, or we
mm-hmm,
have to work extra hard to study where should I invest when that's not even my calling, or that's not even what I'm supposed to be
yeah,
doing, right? And
yep,
so it steals our time, it steals our destiny, because we don't have the time. We don't give space for Father God to speak design, identity, and purpose over us so that we get
mm,
clarity around who we are and why we're here and what we should be doing about it. It
yeah,
steals the impact that we as image bearers have to make disciples and to make um, uh, to disciple nations, which I think there's a twofold
yeah,
Great Commission there. And it steals our legacy. So we're so focused. We have this high time preference, right? We're so focused on the here and now and tomorrow. We don't give thought to a multi generational vision that says, you know
yeah,
what, there's something bigger than me, and there's even something bigger than the next generation. This is multi
mm,
generational, and we are
mm,
going to continue to pass that vision down, that legacy down. By the way, that word legacy is a French word. My pastor taught me this. Legacy is a French word that means um, the team you raise up to carry on the work that you started.
hmm,
A lot of people don't like that word because they think, oh, it's about putting my name on a building or leaving an endowment or starting a
yeah,
foundation. But it's literally a French word that means the team you raise up to carry on the work that you started. And so,
interesting,
where is
huh,
that multi generational vision that would enable and would facilitate a multi generational legacy so that we can keep gaining more and more ground, bringing heaven to earth, renewing, bringing flourishing and abundant life to the earth in an
mm,
increasing manner versus having this? It's like fireworks. We go ooh and ah because we see some level of
hmm,
abundant life over here and over there, and then it goes away, and we forget
yeah.
what that was
It's
like.
very illusory, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very much so.
Interesting. Okay. So, man, this is progressing so easily here, Rick. You're a great guest in terms of helping with
Thanks.
transitions and
Thanks.
everything. Um, so obviously you already kind of went into an economics side here, and so let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin and the redemptive utility that we both see in Bitcoin, and in against the backdrop of a
Yeah.
very uh, corrupt monetary system, right?
Hmm.
And you've taken some serious steps. You've taken a lot of time to educate yourself. I hope you don't mind me saying it. If so, I'll edit it
No.
out. But you're using Bitcoin as a reserve asset for your business. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Hmm.
But how do you see Bitcoin and its first, well, I guess in some ways, how do you see it related to our Christian faith? Because it
Yeah.
is,
Hmm.
it very much is. But then also, how do you see it related to your business, and how do you see it redeeming our economy?
Yeah. So first of all, I see. Well, let me tell you how I got into Bitcoin. So I think I mentioned
Hmm.
it that in the summer of 2021, I actually went on vacation, broke my pinky toe, and
Oh,
so I was kind of
that
relegated
sounds
to
painful.
yeah, it was very to house duty. But in the
Okay.
context of, it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. I was going to investigate blockchain anyway because I was like, I keep hearing this thing about blockchain. I'm a technologist at heart. I need to
Mhm.
figure this thing out. And when I started looking into blockchain, I immediately got into Bitcoin. And once I got into Bitcoin, I'm telling you, it was like Neo in the Matrix. I got plugged in.
Yeah.
I probably watched at least 60 hours of, I found the Breedlove Sailor series. I
Oh
saw
yeah.
Natalie Brunell. She had just launched her Coin Stories podcast. I started eating this stuff up. I started listening to some other people I don't want to mention because I found out that they're probably not as reliable
Mm.
as some of these others. But,
Yeah.
and I just went, oh my gosh. And I literally, I took the orange pill and I felt scales fall from my eyes. Now, what preceded that was me praying, God, how can I steward the money that I'm going to be getting at some point, hopefully
Mm.
towards the end of the year? But that coupled with this, hey, let's figure out blockchain, all of a sudden that became the answer because what I started
Mm.
realizing was the first thing I had to do, and now this is a guy who, even though I have an MBA, I don't have a lot of macroeconomic background.
Mm.
At Grove City, they teach Austrian economics, so at least I had some foundation about what that was. One of my sons is, or but two of my sons are actually economic majors,
Mm.
and so we would have economic discussions. But I started coming down a learning curve of really answering the question, what is money? And I think
Yep.
it's a if you take just a few hours to answer
Hmm.
that question, you'll start realizing, um, that what we think is money really isn't money.
Yeah.
And
It's a deep rabbit hole.
it really
It's a deep.
is. It really, really is. And again, we can talk about that. But to me, that's when I started realizing um, the theft that is inflation.
Hmm.
That's when I started realizing, and so out of that, I came across. Thank God for Bitcoin. I think you may have even introduced me to that book
Mm.
and Jimmy Song and his
Yeah.
some of his stuff. I started watching some of his anytime he was on a podcast and being interviewed. And so I bought that book and I read it, and that helped me answer the question, what is money? And why is what we call money either biblical or not biblical?
Hmm.
There's some better forms of money than, excuse me, than others.
Yep.
And and so once I got that, then they just like Saifedean does in the Bitcoin standard, you spend most of the time focusing on what's wrong with the current system or the
Mm.
history of money. And then all of a sudden you say, well, now let's introduce this thing called Bitcoin. Now let's compare it to all those other former
Yep.
technologies of money.
Yep.
And for thank God it's Bitcoin. Thank God for Bitcoin. They compared Bitcoin to the biblical standard of what is money.
Yep.
And that's really when the light bulb went off, and I went,
Mm.
oh my gosh, uh, this is the answer to the problem. So once you really comprehend the
Mm.
problem and really how bad it is,
Hmm.
um, and it's just not a bad problem. It's not just that the system is evil. It's that it's a force multiplier of evil across the globe.
Mm.
Once you realize how bad the problem is, you go, God, what's the solution? And when you find this thing called Bitcoin and you realize how biblical that money really is, you go, oh, thank God for Bitcoin. He's actually provided a
Yeah.
means for us. I really do believe this is God's provision for us to
Mm.
be able to redeem the economic and the monetary systems of the world so that we can
Hmm.
get back to a biblical standard. And we know that anytime someone uses biblical money,
Hmm.
we can define what that is. But anytime someone uses biblical money, that society
Mm.
flourishes, and
Yep.
that's what God has for us. And so,
Mm.
so for me um, personally, it's been my store of value.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
and it's not quite to the place of being a medium of exchange, but it is
Right.
absolutely a wonderful store of value. And so, as I have had these liquidity events, I just some people think I'm crazy. I just buy Bitcoin, and even when people say, "Well, are you sure you want to go all in on Bitcoin?" I'm like, "What's the alternative?" Because the
Yeah.
real
Right.
the real Ponzi scheme is the U.S. dollar, and so
Absolutely.
and that's the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry, as they say.
Right.
Um, and so for me, it's like, no, my money, and we saw it with Silicon Valley Bank and some of the bank runs from a year ago. my money's not safe over there. It's actually safe over here, more
Mm-hmm.
safe. Not only is it safe from inflation, it's also safe from people who want to control your money, or who because of fractional reserve banking, can't give you back the money that you may ask for from them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it helped me personally to make sure that I had a good store of value, so that that economic energy does not get taken away, does not melt like the ice cube.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then for my business, for the business, I think I did this for a couple of reasons. I started investing in, and we're not talking like huge dollars here, but I wanted to buy, say, 2 or 3 Bitcoin. One, I wanted to make a statement to say,
Mm-hmm.
listen, I believe this is important. And I want, not only am I being blessed by it personally, I want my business to be blessed by investing in and participating in a biblical monetary network. So, one, it's just a statement. But
Mm-hmm.
second of all, I said it just now, right? Where else are you going to go? It's an inflation hedge, right? The stock market's overheated, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
huge risk there. You could say, well, put it in bonds. And we've been through the tech bubble, we're through the banking crisis, and now I think we're headed into a sovereign debt crisis. And so
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
not convinced that it's safe in
Yeah.
treasuries and in different bonds and stuff. Now I do have cash. I have like the barbell strategy, where I have a lot of Bitcoin and I have some cash.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of sitting there as dry powder to take advantage of dips and take advantage of what I think over the course of the next 18, 24 months, or maybe at least 4 years, might
Yep.
be, a correction in the stock market and the like. And so, but um, but for me, that I put so much in Bitcoin because the alternatives, they're either risky,
Yeah.
or they're not going to get the return on value as much. It's the best performing asset. I don't know if you've seen Saylor and others talk about this, but if you look at, I think Preston talks about this. If you look
Mm-hmm.
at every 4 year period that has existed, I mean, from every day forward for 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin has always appreciated. So as long as you have
Yep.
that 4 year time horizon, and don't worry about the volatility going
Yep.
up and down, which I love actually, then then you'll be fine. It is a long-term store of value. So for me,
Yeah.
I'm using it to hedge inflation. I'm using it for future investments. So as that appreciates, I'll be able to do more
Mm-hmm.
with the less that I had, when I invested in it as fiat currency. Not only does my ice cube not melting, my ice cube's growing. And so I'm
Right.
actually able to deploy that energy for future investments in
Mm-hmm.
Newton Institute, or with partnerships, or whatever, might come our way. And then eventually, as banks are allowed to start custodying
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin, and you can start borrowing against it, I see that as an opportunity to um, for Bitcoin to be used as collateral for low
Yep.
interest business loans, and again, to deploy capital to have loans and to pay interest the proper way, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it grows the economy, it increases GDP, it increases the pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good reason to. I'm not a fan of debt, but I am a fan of borrowing if there's an ROI associated with that borrowing. So
Yeah.
so it'll, for me, that's probably
Hmm.
the 4 reasons that I
Yeah.
am using it even as a treasury asset for Newton Institute, for my current company.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. I super great explanation. Appreciate that a ton. So then, how has Bitcoin changed your business mindset? In what ways has it impact? I mean, you've kind of alluded to some things already, but I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to ask the question to see what you might say, because you've been an entrepreneur now for a long time,
Yeah.
and in the last few years, you said plugged in. I think you were unplugged from the matrix, however you want to say it,
No, you're right.
and
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're exactly right. I got unplugged from the
yeah,
matrix.
you got unplugged,
I was
and so
thinking of the
you're.
download of information when Neo was learning how to do,
Oh
you
yes,
know,
yes,
whatever, jujitsu and all that stuff. But
that's right. But yeah, so suddenly you take your entrepreneurial gifts and you're suddenly seeing the world in a very different way than you did prior. I'm really curious. How did that impact you and the way you view business now and how you
Yeah.
operate?
Um, the biggest factor that it has impacted me is my time preference.
Oh,
So
good.
as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur,
Hmm.
and I probably had some head trash around this, some not good thinking around this. I always, the saying speed kills. First to
Hmm.
market, right?
Oh, yeah.
Do things faster, learn, fall fast, learn, fail fast, those kinds of methodologies. Get your minimum viable product out there and learn from the marketplace and let them give you feedback. And it's all about speed and iterating fast around those learning curves.
Hmm.
Um, that fit in with my
Hmm.
natural unredeemed personality, that performance achievement
Yeah.
oriented individual who tried to be all things to all people, who was very impatient, who did not stop and smell
Hmm.
the roses, who did not take care of his body, exercising health wise, what I put into it, all those things.
Hmm.
And probably what it has helped me to understand is to have more of a low time preference, which means um, take it slow, enjoy the day, be present in today. And
Hmm.
if I don't get done all that I thought I was going to get done, that's okay. That's tomorrow. And oh,
Hmm.
by the way, I'm building a team up to carry on what I'm starting. And so if I do pass away tomorrow, it will carry on. It's
Hmm.
not all dependent on me. And if it doesn't, I've been writing this book. I'm writing a book called Start with Who.
Yeah.
And um, I thought I needed to get that done 3 years ago. So I was like, heads
Yeah.
down, trying to write it, and
Yeah.
it didn't go very far. I eventually, I think that I processed that issue in our Truth at Work group,
Yeah. Yeah.
and someone had a great suggestion of getting a book coach. So again, I did a search for that, found a wonderful woman who's helping me with my book now, and it
Hmm.
has just taken so much longer to write this book than I ever thought because one, God's just not in as much of a hurry as I am, and two, if you're going to write a book called Start with Who, you better have some things dealt with on the inside that enable you to speak clearly to that subject. And what I
Yeah.
found was I had a lot of clogs,
Hmm.
clogging up the system. I had to
Yep.
put the book on the shelf a few times in order to process some pain and I need to be healed in some areas, going back childhood stuff. And I'm still in the middle of that process. And
Yeah.
so what it has allowed me to do is to take the long view and say, if this doesn't get done for 2, 3, 4 years, that's fine.
Hmm.
God, I trust you. The Bitcoin has allowed me to have the resources that I believe will appreciate to be able to sustain that. So
Hmm.
that's good. I'm
Yeah.
not depending on that. The Lord's my provision, but it's nice
Yeah.
to have that. It's nice to see
Hmm.
how He's doing that through Bitcoin. But that's secondary. More, it's renewed my mind around having more of a lower time preference and not feeling like I have to get my money or my business is not breaking even yet. So
Hmm.
it's a net drain on the resources that I have, but I'm okay with that because we want to do this right. We want to make sure the book is the one that God wants me to write,
Hmm.
and we want to make sure that the tools and the platform and um, the branding and the marketing and everything else that needs to go together to make sure that when we go to market, I'm not talking about being perfect,
Hmm.
but I am talking about making sure we're ready to both sustain and scale what we think is going to be some demand.
Hmm.
Because every person we talk to about this message, they resonate with it, they recognize it, and they also recognize that there's very few people doing this work. If they do it, they touch on it and then move on, and they certainly don't go as deep as we do, and they certainly don't connect it with the who question with the why, how, and where, and what questions.
Yep.
And so there's a need. They recognize the need, and so we want to make sure that when we roll this out, we do this right. We're piloting it. We're serving leaders and teams and organizations that God brings our way, but we're not proactively going to market. Um, and so we're in build mode.
Hmm.
And it's okay to take the time that's necessary to make sure what we put together um, is good, is
Yeah.
quality, can really make sure it adds value. And the adage, you only have one chance to make a first impression. We want to make sure our first impression is one that's been well thought out, has great tools, helps you not be dependent on us, that you can be trained to do this with your clients or in your company. So all of that is happening as we speak. So I'd say that's the biggest thing that has happened as a result of Bitcoin specifically, and the multi-generational and the taking a longer term perspective on things.
Man, that's great. Rick, this has been an amazing conversation, and I'm really sad to see how quickly it has flown by. It has absolutely flown. So much. Oh, I know if folks are listening, you may have to, maybe you've been pausing along the way. That's what I do. I'll listen to podcasts and I'll hit pause and I'll like have to process and take time to think. I have a feeling that people have either been doing that or they're going to have to go back through and listen again. Because you've just added a ton of value for folks here today. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being so transparent. Thank you for your passion and your humility to start with yourself first. I ever since I've known you, I feel like that's been at the core of who you are, and I'm grateful because I've kind of been an indirect receiver of that or beneficiary of that. Being in the Truth at Work group with you and struggling through kind of a business development role with this other ministry, and then coming to the realization that I needed to step out and become a Truth at Work chapter president myself. And the minute I said it out loud, you were the first one. I said this to you on the phone the other day too, but you were the first one to say, well, that makes sense. And you just so affirmed me in that. And it has been an incredible journey. And so I'm grateful for your impact on me and my life in that. And so many others, man. And it's just crazy that you've been through a tough time in your life growing up in a dysfunctional family. I had a dysfunctional family as well. And yet you are, in many ways, you've become a refuge by the grace of God for so many other people, who maybe have experienced something similar in their lives. So yeah, I'm so grateful for you, Rick. And I'm grateful that I get to thank you like this in public for everybody to hear.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, but thank you. I appreciate that. Well, the good news is I'm just being who God called me to be. I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. When I found out that you were exploring that option to be a Truth at Work chapter president, it's like, it wasn't like, oh, take a risk, be an entrepreneur, come on, go for it. It was more like, no, that's who he is. He is someone who can facilitate conversations and who can help father a fatherless generation and have that come through him, and and to facilitate great conversation. You are a great facilitator, and I would say space maker, creating space for Holy Spirit to move in our midst. And so that, to me, it just fit. And so that's the beautiful thing about this Start With Who message. It gives you permission to be who God called you to be, who he made you to be. And we believe the best leader you'll ever be is one who's authentic to who God made you to be. So you don't have to try to be like somebody else. And that is so refreshing. It takes away all the pretenses. It takes away the competition, the comparisons, all of that stuff. So anyway, that's great. That's probably maybe what you're seeing as I've learned to walk more in that space. I'm not quite fully healed and quite fully there yet, but the more you walk that way, the more attractive it is to people, because they're like, oh, that person's just being real. And that's what we want. We crave that. We want people to be real. We want them to be authentic. We don't want the fake. We're seeing a lot of this at these conventions and the prepped speeches and the
oh gosh,
whatever. It just drives
referring
me
to
crazy.
The political environment right now, which is
we're looking for authentic people. The world is looking for authentic people, and it's very attractive. Jesus was attractive because he just was who God made him to be. And so for me, that's exactly what this is all about. It's just giving people permission to just be themselves. You are enough. Like, we always have that doubt that says, I'm not enough. And the reality is, oh yeah, you are enough, and you're actually with God, you're more than enough. And And so that's really probably the essence of the Start With Who message. And so it's good to see you walking that out as well.
Yeah, it's so fun, man. It is definitely fun to be living out what God called you to, who God called you to be, and what He called you to do. So how can folks, I don't know, follow you, get in touch with you,
Yeah.
learn from you, learn more about
Well,
Start With
yeah.
Who?
Yeah, everything right now. So we're under development. So you might be underwhelmed by some of these resources. Again, not trying to be something that we're not, because
Yeah.
I always say we're Tony Stark. We're in build mode. We're in the basement, building out something.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you can visit us at newtoninstitute.com.
Okay.
That's probably the best place. You can follow me on Twitter. I think it's Rick Newton 777
Okay.
is the handle. I might
Okay.
tweet something every once in a while. I mostly repost things that I find that are truth or have wisdom in it. I'm not posting the Start With Who stuff just yet. We're planning on a fairly significant book launch, Q2, Q3 next year, and so then I'll start showing up more probably in social media, and probably Twitter would be the best place. But we'll do LinkedIn, we'll do Facebook, we'll do all those things. But I'd say Twitter and the newtoninstitute.com website, best place.
Okay. Good. I'm glad to have you, to grab you like this before things get real crazy beginning of next year.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rick, man, thank you for being on the show, man. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Mike.
Let's get to work.